Have you ever wondered what would happen if you accidentally stumbled into someone else's world, only to discover they were desperately trying to escape into yours? Hannah Reyes thought she was just seeking shelter from a sudden downpour when she slipped into that luxurious limousine, chatting easily with what she assumed was the friendly driver. Little did she know, the man behind the wheel wasn't an employee at all, but Lucas Devereux, the Millionaire CEO who owned the very building she'd been catering in, and he was about to experience something money couldn't buy: genuine human connection without the weight of his fortune defining every interaction. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The rain began as a gentle mist, barely noticeable against the glass walls of the Devereux Tower's 32nd floor. Hannah Reyes carefully arranged the last of the canapés on silver platters, her practiced hands moving with quiet efficiency, while the city's elite mingled behind her in animated conversation. The charity gala was in full swing, crystal glasses clinking, and designer gowns rustling across marble floors, but Hannah remained focused on her work, invisible to the guests who barely glanced in her direction. She had been catering events for 3 years now, ever since graduating from culinary school with more debt than opportunities. Tonight's event was particularly prestigious, hosted by Devereux Industries for their annual Children's Hospital fundraiser. Hannah had spent weeks perfecting the menu, staying up late in her tiny studio apartment to practice plating techniques and flavor combinations. This was exactly the kind of high-profile event that could launch her small catering business into something substantial if everything went perfectly. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was surrounded by people who could change her life with a single recommendation, yet she might as well have been part of the furniture. Hannah had always been the quiet one, the observer rather than the participant. Even in culinary school, while her classmates networked aggressively and made connections, she had preferred to let her food speak for itself. Tonight was no different. She remained behind the scenes, ensuring every detail was flawless while staying carefully out of the spotlight. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Hannah watched the gentle mist transform into proper raindrops, streaking down the glass like silver tears. The weather forecast had called for clear skies, but Seattle's climate had a mind of its own. She glanced at her watch, noting that the event was scheduled to run for another 2 hours. Her assistant had already left to handle another smaller event across town, leaving Hannah to manage the cleanup and equipment breakdown alone. As the evening progressed, Hannah found herself stealing glances at the guests, wondering what their lives were like beyond these glittering facades. There was something almost theatrical about the way they moved, every gesture carefully calculated, every smile perfectly practiced. She had grown up in a working-class family where authenticity was valued above all else, where her grandmother's kitchen table had been the center of their universe, surrounded by the aromas of homemade tortillas and the sound crapple of genuine laughter. The contrast between that warmth and this polished perfection made Hannah feel like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. She watched a group of women in evening gowns discuss their recent vacations to the French Riviera, their conversation peppered with casual mentions of private jets and yacht parties. A cluster of men in expensive suits debated the merits of various investment strategies, their voices carrying the confidence that came from never having to worry about money. Hannah's phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother asking if she could help with his college tuition payment next month. She quickly typed back a reassuring response, though she wasn't entirely sure how she would manage it. These events paid well, but not well enough to cover both her own expenses and her family's needs. She had been the first in her family to attend college, and the responsibility of success weighed heavily on her shoulders. By 10 o'clock, the rain had intensified dramatically, drumming against the windows with increasing urgency. Hannah began the process of packing up her equipment, carefully wrapping knives and storing leftover ingredients in insulated containers. The guests were gradually making their way toward the elevators, their conversations growing louder as the evening's alcohol took effect. Several people complimented the food in passing, but Hannah was too busy working to engage in extended conversation. She was wheeling a cart of dirty dishes toward the service elevator when she overheard 2 women discussing the event's host. "Have you seen Lucas Devereux tonight?" one asked, her voice carrying that particular tone reserved for gossip. "Someone said he disappeared from his own party. Can you imagine? All these people here to see him, and he just vanishes." "Typical," the other woman replied with a knowing laugh. "I heard he's been doing that more often lately. Shows up for the speeches, then disappears. Must be nice to have that kind of freedom." Hannah paused, intrigued despite herself. She had heard the name Lucas Devereux throughout the evening, references to the mysterious CEO who had apparently built his technology empire from nothing. But she hadn't paid much attention to the details, too focused on her own responsibilities to get caught up in celebrity gossip. Still, there was something compelling about the idea of someone with unlimited resources choosing to escape from the very world that had made him wealthy. The service elevator was occupied when Hannah reached it, so she decided to take her cart to the main elevators instead. The lobby level had a service entrance that would be more convenient for loading her van anyway. As she waited for the elevator, Hannah noticed that the rain visible through the lobby windows had become torrential, the kind of sudden downpour that turned Seattle streets into temporary rivers. Her heart sank as she realized she would have to make multiple trips between the building and her van, and she hadn't brought an umbrella. The catering equipment represented a significant investment, and getting it soaked could mean expensive repairs or replacements. She mentally calculated the cost of potential damage against the money she would earn from tonight's event, feeling the familiar anxiety that came with running a small business on thin margins. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, and Hannah maneuvered her cart inside, pressing the button for the ground floor. As the doors closed, she caught a glimpse of herself in the polished steel surface, noting how tired she looked. Her dark hair had escaped from its neat ponytail, and her simple black dress, chosen for its practicality rather than style, bore the subtle stains that came from a long evening of food preparation and service. She had always been self-conscious about her appearance, especially in environments like tonight's gala, where everyone seemed to have stepped out of a magazine. Growing up, her mother had often reminded her that beauty came from within, but Hannah found it difficult to feel confident when surrounded by people who seemed to have won the genetic lottery and had the resources to enhance their natural advantages. The elevator descended smoothly, carrying Hannah away from the glittering world above and back toward the reality of loading her van in the pouring rain. She checked her phone again, noting several missed calls from her mother. Hannah made a mental note to call back once she finished packing, knowing her mother would want to hear every detail about the evening, especially whether she had made any promising connections. As the elevator doors opened onto the ground floor, Hannah was struck by the sound of rain drumming against the building's entrance. Through the glass doors, she could see water cascading from the sky like a waterfall, creating small rivers along the sidewalks and overwhelming the storm drains. The few people outside were running for cover, their expensive clothing no match for nature's sudden assault. Hannah took a deep breath and pushed her cart toward the entrance, steeling herself for the inevitable soaking she was about to receive. She had survived worse challenges than getting caught in the rain, and she refused to let a little water dampen her spirits. Tonight had been a success in terms of the food service, and that was what mattered most. Just as she reached the glass doors, a security guard approached her with a concerned expression. "Ma'am, you might want to wait a few minutes before heading out there," he suggested, gesturing toward the storm. "The weather service just issued a flash flood warning for downtown. This kind of rain can be dangerous." Hannah paused, considering her options. She could wait for the storm to pass, but that might mean staying in the building for hours. Alternatively, she could try to make a run for it and hope for the best. Her van was parked in a loading zone that expired at midnight, and she couldn't afford the parking ticket that would result from leaving it there overnight. "How long do these storms usually last?" she asked the guard, who shrugged sympathetically. "Could be 20 minutes, could be 2 hours. Weather's been crazy lately," he replied. "There's a covered area out back where some of the drivers wait. Might be more comfortable than staying in the lobby." Hannah thanked him and decided to explore this option. She pushed her cart through the building's corridors, following signs toward the service areas. The back of the building was less impressive than the grand lobby, with utilitarian concrete walls and fluorescent lighting, but it felt more comfortable to Hannah somehow. This was the part of the building where actual work got done, where people like her made their living behind the scenes. The covered area turned out to be a loading dock with a large overhang that provided excellent protection from the rain. Several vehicles were parked there, including a few delivery trucks and what appeared to be a limousine. Hannah was surprised to see such an expensive car in the service area, but she supposed even chauffeurs needed to take shelter from the storm. As she positioned her cart under the overhang, Hannah noticed that the limousine's engine was running, its headlights cutting through the rain-darkened evening. The rear windows were tinted, making it impossible to see inside, but the driver's window was partially open. She could see the silhouette of someone sitting behind the wheel, apparently waiting out the storm just as she was. The rain continued to pound against the overhang's metal roof, creating a rhythmic drumming that was almost hypnotic. Hannah found herself relaxing for the first time all evening, finally able to take a moment to process the night's events. The gala had gone smoothly, the guests had seemed pleased with the food, and she had managed to complete her first major event without any significant disasters. A sudden gust of wind drove rain under the overhang, causing Hannah to step back quickly to avoid getting soaked. In her haste, she bumped into her cart, sending a stack of empty platters clattering to the ground. The sound echoed through the covered area, and Hannah immediately began gathering the scattered items, her cheeks burning with embarrassment even though no one else was around to witness her clumsiness. "Need some help with that?" a voice called out, and Hannah looked up to see that the limousine's driver had gotten out of the car and was walking toward her. He was tall and lean, wearing a simple dark suit that looked expensive but understated. His brown hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it, and his eyes held a kind of tired warmth that surprised Hannah. "Oh, no thank you, I'm fine," Hannah replied quickly, continuing to gather the platters. "I'm sorry for the noise, I didn't realize anyone else was out here." "Don't worry about it," the man said, crouching down to help her collect the remaining items despite her protests. "Waiting out the storm too?" Hannah nodded, accepting his help gratefully. "I'm supposed to load all this equipment into my van, but I didn't expect to get caught in a monsoon." She gestured toward the torrential rain beyond the overhang. "I'm Hannah, by the way. I was catering the event upstairs." "Nice to meet you, Hannah. I'm Lucas," he replied, standing and brushing off his hands. "How did the event go? I heard it was quite the gathering." Hannah was struck by how normal he seemed, how easy it was to talk to him. Most of the drivers she encountered at events like this were either harried and stressed or overly formal and distant. Lucas seemed genuinely interested in conversation, which was refreshing after an evening of being largely ignored by the gala guests. "It went well, I think," Hannah said, organizing the platters in her cart. "The food seemed to be a hit anyway. Though I have to admit, I didn't interact much with the guests. I prefer to stay behind the scenes." "Smart approach," Lucas said with a slight smile. "Sometimes the behind-the-scenes work is more important than what happens in the spotlight. How long have you been catering?" Hannah found herself opening up to this stranger in a way that surprised her. Perhaps it was the intimacy of their shared shelter from the storm, or maybe it was simply the relief of talking to someone who treated her like a person rather than invisible help. "About 3 years now. I started my own business after culinary school. It's been challenging, but tonight felt like a real breakthrough." "Starting your own business takes courage," Lucas observed, leaning against the side of his limousine. "Especially in a competitive field like catering. What made you decide to go out on your own, instead of working for an established company?" The question touched on something Hannah rarely discussed, the deep-seated need for independence that had driven her to take such a risky path. "I guess I wanted to prove something to myself," she said slowly. "My family never had much money, and I was the first to go to college. Everyone expected me to play it safe, get a steady job with benefits. But I wanted to create something of my own, something that reflected my values, and my vision." Lucas nodded thoughtfully, and Hannah was struck by how intently he listened. Most people, especially those in positions of authority, had a tendency to offer immediate advice or judgment, but Lucas seemed content to simply hear her story without trying to fix or improve it. "That's admirable," he said finally. "It's easy to talk about following your dreams, but actually doing it, especially without a safety net, that takes real strength. How did your family react when you told them you were starting your own business?" Hannah laughed, remembering her mother's horrified expression when she had announced her plans. "My mom was convinced I was making a huge mistake. She kept talking about stability and security, all the things she never had growing up. My dad was more supportive, but I could see the worry in his eyes. They wanted to protect me from the kind of financial stress they experienced. But you did it anyway, Lucas said, and there was something in his voice that suggested he understood the complexity of disappointing family members in pursuit of personal goals. I did, Hannah confirmed. And some days I wonder if they were right. Running a small business is terrifying. There are nights when I lie awake calculating expenses and wondering if I'll be able to pay my bills, but then I have an evening like tonight, where everything comes together perfectly, and I remember why I took the risk. The rain continued to fall steadily, creating a cocoon of sound around their conversation. Hannah realized she had been talking for several minutes without feeling self-conscious, which was unusual for her. There was something about Lucas that put her at ease, a quality of genuine attention that made her feel heard. What about you? Hannah asked, curious about this unusually thoughtful limousine driver. How long had you been driving for events like this? Lucas was quiet for a moment, and Hannah wondered if she had somehow overstepped a boundary. But then he smiled, and she noticed how the expression transformed his entire face, softening the tired lines around his eyes. Actually, driving isn't my primary job, he said carefully. I'm more involved in the business side of things, but I find myself behind the wheel more often these days. It's peaceful, in a way. Gives me time to think. Hannah nodded, understanding the appeal of solitary work. I can see that. There's something meditative about having a task that requires just enough concentration to quiet your mind, but not so much that you can't let your thoughts wander. Exactly, Lucas said, looking surprised. Most people don't understand that. They think if you're not constantly busy, constantly achieving, then you're wasting time. But sometimes the most important work happens in those quiet moments. Hannah studied his face, noting the way he spoke about achievement and busyness with a kind of weary familiarity. She wondered what kind of pressure he faced in his business role, what expectations he carried that made him seek refuge in the simple act of driving. I think our society has forgotten the value of stillness, Hannah said. Everything is about productivity and efficiency, about maximizing every moment. But creativity, real creativity, needs space to breathe. Lucas turned to look at her more directly, and Hannah felt a flutter of nervousness under his intense gaze. That's a beautiful way to put it, he said. Creativity needs space to breathe. I've never heard it expressed quite like that, but it's exactly right. The conversation lulled into a comfortable silence, both of them listening to the rain and lost in their own thoughts. Hannah found herself stealing glances at Lucas, trying to reconcile his thoughtful demeanor with her assumptions about limousine drivers. He carried himself with a confidence that seemed natural rather than performed, and his clothes, while simple, were clearly expensive. Perhaps he worked for a high-end company that paid well and attracted a more sophisticated clientele. Can I ask you something? Hannah said, breaking the silence. You seem different from other drivers I've met at events like this. More, I don't know, philosophical, I guess. Lucas laughed, a genuine sound that echoed under the overhang. Is that your polite way of saying I'm weird? No, Hannah protested, feeling her cheeks warm. I just meant that you listen, really listen, when people talk, and you ask thoughtful questions. It's refreshing. Maybe I'm just curious about people, Lucas said. I spend a lot of time around individuals who are used to being the center of attention, who expect others to be interested in their stories. But everyone has something interesting to say, if you take the time to hear it. Hannah felt a surge of warmth at his words, recognizing the validation she had been craving all evening. I wish more people felt that way. Sometimes I think we've forgotten how to have real conversations. Everything's become about networking or positioning yourself for advantage. You noticed that tonight? Lucas asked, and there was something knowing in his tone. It was hard to miss, Hannah replied. I mean, I wasn't exactly part of the social scene, but I could observe it while I worked. All those perfectly polished people, saying all the right things, but somehow it all felt so empty. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the rain. What do you think makes a conversation feel real? He asked finally. Hannah considered the question seriously, surprised by how much she enjoyed discussing these deeper topics with someone who genuinely seemed to care about her opinions. Vulnerability, I think, she said slowly. When people are willing to share something true about themselves, not just the highlight reel they want everyone to see. Like right now, talking to you, it feels real because we're both being honest about our experiences. Even though we just met? Lucas asked. Maybe especially because we just met, Hannah replied. There's no history, no expectations, no roles we're supposed to play. We can just be ourselves. Lucas nodded thoughtfully, and Hannah noticed him glance back toward the building, as if remembering something he had left behind. That's rare, he said. Most interactions, especially in professional settings, are so layered with context and expectations that authenticity becomes almost impossible. Is that what you experience in your business role? Hannah asked, curious about the slight tension she heard in his voice. Sometimes, Lucas admitted. People often have preconceived notions about who I am or what I represent before they even meet me. It can make genuine connection challenging. Hannah felt a pang of sympathy for this man who seemed so grounded and genuine. That must be lonely, she said softly. Lucas looked at her with surprise, as if her simple acknowledgement had touched something he rarely shared with others. It can be, he said quietly, which is why conversations like this one are so valuable. The rain began to lighten slightly, though it was still too heavy for Hannah to venture out with her equipment. She found herself hoping the storm would continue for a while longer, reluctant to end this unexpected connection. When was the last time she had talked to someone who made her feel so comfortable, so seen? What drives you? Lucas asked suddenly. Beyond the practical need to make a living, what makes you passionate about what you do? The question caught Hannah off guard with its directness, but she appreciated that he was interested in understanding her motivations rather than just making small talk. I think it's the connection between food and memory, she said after a moment. When I create a dish, I'm not just combining ingredients. I'm trying to evoke something emotional, something that will make people feel cared for. That's what you were doing tonight, Lucas observed, creating experiences for people. Exactly, Hannah said, pleased that he understood. My grandmother always said that cooking was an act of love, whether you're feeding your family or strangers. Tonight, I wanted every bite to feel like someone had put thought and care into it, specifically for the person eating it. Lucas smiled, and Hannah noticed how the expression reached his eyes. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was, Hannah said, feeling the familiar warmth that came with memories of her grandmother's kitchen. She taught me that food isn't just about nutrition, it's about connection. Some of my happiest childhood memories are of sitting at her kitchen table, learning to fold empanadas while she told me stories about our family's history. Those kinds of traditions are precious, Lucas said. Family stories that get passed down through generations, connecting us to something larger than ourselves. Hannah nodded, touched by his understanding. What about your family? Do you have traditions that shaped who you are? Lucas's expression grew more guarded, and Hannah worried she had pushed too far into personal territory. But after a moment, he answered, My family has always valued achievement above all else. Success was the only tradition that mattered, the only thing that got passed down from generation to generation. There was something painful in his voice, a weight that Hannah recognized from her own struggles with family expectations. That sounds like a lot of pressure, she said gently. It was, Lucas admitted. Still is, in many ways. When success becomes your identity, it's hard to know who you are when you're not achieving something. Hannah felt a surge of empathy for this man who seemed to carry such heavy burdens despite his apparent success in business. Maybe that's why you enjoy driving, she suggested. It's a chance to just be, without having to prove anything to anyone. Lucas looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. You're very perceptive, he said. Most people don't understand the appeal of stepping away from ambition, even temporarily. Sometimes stepping away is the only way to remember what you're really working toward, Hannah replied. I learned that during my first year of business ownership. I was so focused on succeeding that I forgot why I wanted to succeed in the first place. What reminded you? Lucas asked. Hannah smiled, remembering the moment of clarity that had refocused her priorities. A little girl at one of my events. She was maybe 5 years old, and she wandered into the kitchen while I was plating desserts. She asked what I was making, and when I showed her the chocolate tarts, her whole face lit up. She said they looked like tiny treasures. In that moment, I remembered that the joy of creating something beautiful was more important than any business metric. Tiny treasures, Lucas repeated softly. That's a beautiful way to see your work. Children have a way of cutting through all the complexity and seeing the heart of things, Hannah said. Adults tend to overcomplicate everything, myself included. Lucas laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise him. I don't think I've been called an adult with such resignation before. Oh, I didn't mean it that way, Hannah said, worried she had offended him. I just meant that we lose some of that natural wonder as we get older, that ability to see magic in everyday things. No, you're absolutely right, Lucas said. And I think that loss of wonder is one of the saddest things about growing up. We trade curiosity for certainty, possibility for security. Hannah found herself studying his profile as he gazed out at the rain, noting the tension in his jaw and the way his shoulders seemed to carry invisible weight. There was something almost melancholy about him despite his apparent success, a longing for something he couldn't quite name. What would you do? Hannah asked impulsively. If you could start over? If you could choose any path without worrying about expectations or obligations? Lucas was quiet for so long that Hannah wondered if she had overstepped again. But when he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than defensive. I think I'd want to do something that felt more directly connected to helping people. All this success, all this wealth, but sometimes I wonder what it's actually for. The admission hung in the air between them, more intimate than anything they had shared before. Hannah felt honored that he had trusted her with such a vulnerable thought, and she chose her response carefully. Maybe the question isn't whether to start over, she said slowly, but how to integrate that desire to help into what you're already doing. Sometimes the most powerful changes happen from within existing structures. Lucas turned to look at her, and Hannah was struck by the intensity of his gaze. You really believe that? I do, Hannah said with conviction. I think you can honor your responsibilities while still finding ways to create meaning and connection. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You're remarkably wise for someone who claims to prefer staying behind the scenes, Lucas said, and Hannah felt a flutter of pride at the compliment. Maybe wisdom comes from observing rather than performing, she replied. When you're not the center of attention, you have more opportunity to really see what's happening around you. The rain was definitely lighter now, though still steady enough to make loading her van unpleasant. Hannah found herself torn between the practical need to pack up her equipment and her desire to continue this conversation that had become so unexpectedly meaningful. I should probably start loading my van soon, she said reluctantly. I don't want to keep you from whatever you need to do. Actually, Lucas said, glancing back toward the building, I'm in no hurry to get back to my obligations. This has been the most interesting conversation I've had in months. Hannah felt a warm glow at his words, but also a touch of sadness at the thought that their encounter was temporary. It's been wonderful talking with you too, she said. I don't often meet people who ask such thoughtful questions. Would you like some help loading your equipment? Lucas offered. I don't mind getting a little wet, and it would go faster with two people. Hannah was touched by the offer, but she shook her head. That's very kind, but I couldn't ask you to do that. Besides, won't your employer be expecting you back? Lucas smiled, and there was something almost secretive about the expression. My employer is very understanding about these things, and I'd genuinely like to help. Hannah considered the offer, weighing her natural inclination to handle things herself against the practical benefits of assistance. Are you sure? It's not exactly glamorous work. I think I can handle it, Lucas said with amusement. Besides, after listening to you talk about your passion for your work, I'm curious to see more of what goes into creating those tiny treasures. Hannah found herself agreeing, touched by his genuine interest in her craft. Together, they ventured out into the lighter rain, Lucas helping her maneuver the cart across the parking area to where her van was parked. The rain was still substantial enough to soak them both within minutes, but Lucas didn't complain or hurry through the process. As they loaded equipment into the van, Hannah was impressed by how carefully Lucas handled her tools and supplies. He asked questions about different pieces of equipment, genuinely interested in understanding their purpose and function. Most people saw catering supplies as utilitarian objects, but Lucas seemed to appreciate the craftsmanship and precision required for DAS. Professional food preparation. "This knife is beautiful," he said, examining one of Hannah's prized chef's knives before wrapping it carefully in its protective case. "It looks like it's been well cared for." "It was a graduation gift from my grandmother," Hannah explained, taking the wrapped knife and placing it in its designated spot in the van. "She saved for months to buy it. She said every chef needs at least one knife that feels like an extension of their hand." "She sounds like she understood the importance of having the right tools for your craft," Lucas observed, helping her lift a heavy container of serving platters. "She understood that taking pride in your work starts with respecting your tools," Hannah replied. "She taught me that everything matters, from the sharpness of your knife to the temperature of your workspace. Details that might seem insignificant to others can make the difference between good food and great food." Lucas nodded thoughtfully as they continued loading the van. That attention to detail was evident tonight. "I've been to a lot of events, and the quality of the food was exceptional. You should be proud of what you accomplished." Hannah felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment, especially coming from someone who clearly had experience with high-end events. "Thank you. That means a lot, especially from someone in your position." "My position?" Lucas asked, and Hannah detected a note of curiosity in his voice. "Well, you must work a lot of upscale events," Hannah explained. "You obviously have experience with this kind of gathering. Your insights about the guests earlier were very perceptive." Lucas was quiet for a moment, focusing intently on securing a stack of chafing dishes. "I suppose I do have a certain perspective on these events," he said finally, "though perhaps not the one you might expect." Hannah was about to ask what he meant when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and saw her mother's name, along with a notification that she had missed several calls. "I'm sorry, I should take this," she said apologetically. "My mom gets worried when I don't call her back." "Of course," Lucas said, continuing to organize equipment in the van while Hannah answered the phone. "Mija, I was getting worried." Her mother's voice came through the phone, tinged with the familiar concern that Hannah both appreciated and found slightly overwhelming. "How did the big event go?" "It went really well, Mom," Hannah said, stepping slightly away from the van to avoid disturbing Lucas. "The food was a hit, and I think I made a good impression. It could lead to more opportunities." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Were you able to talk to any important people? Make connections?" Hannah glanced back at Lucas, who was carefully arranging her equipment with the same attention to detail she would have used herself. "Actually, yes. I had a really interesting conversation with someone. We talked about business and family and, well, life in general. Business contacts are so important," her mother said, launching into familiar advice about networking and self-promotion. Hannah listened with half her attention while watching Lucas work, struck by how naturally he had stepped in to help her, despite having no obligation to do so. After promising to call her mother the next day with more details, Hannah ended the call and rejoined Lucas at the van. "Sorry about that," she said. "Family check-ins are non-negotiable in my household." "Family is important," Lucas said simply. "Your mother sounds like she cares about your success." "She does," Hannah agreed. "Sometimes I think she wants it more than I do. She's lived vicariously through my achievements since I was the first to go to college. It's sweet, but also a lot of pressure." "The weight of being the family's hope for advancement," Lucas said with understanding. "That's a heavy burden to carry." Hannah looked at him with surprise, struck by how precisely he had identified the complex emotions she struggled with regarding her family's expectations. "Exactly. I love them, and I want to make them proud, but sometimes I feel like I'm living their dreams instead of my own." "What would your dreams look like if they were entirely your own?" Lucas asked as they finished loading the last of the equipment. Hannah paused, realizing she rarely allowed herself to consider that question. "I think I'd want to open a small restaurant," she said slowly. "Nothing fancy or trendy, just a place where people could come for comfort food made with love. Somewhere that felt like home." "That sounds perfect," Lucas said, and his voice carried such conviction that Hannah felt a surge of possibility. "Have you looked into what it would take to make that happen?" I've done some research, Hannah admitted, but the startup costs are enormous, and the failure rate for restaurants is so high. It feels like such a huge risk. All the best things involve risk, Lucas pointed out. Your catering business was a risk too, and look how well tonight went. Hannah smiled, appreciating his encouragement. You're right. I suppose I've gotten comfortable with the level of risk I'm already taking. The idea of expanding feels overwhelming. Maybe the key is taking it one step at a time, Lucas suggested. Building on what you've already accomplished rather than starting from scratch. They had finished loading the van, and both of them were thoroughly soaked from the rain. Hannah's hair was plastered to her head, and Lucas's expensive-looking suit was definitely ruined, but he didn't seem to care. If anything, he looked more relaxed than he had when they first met, as if the rain had washed away some invisible layer of tension. I can't thank you enough for helping me, Hannah said, as they stood beside the loaded van. You didn't have to do that, especially not in this weather. It was my pleasure, Lucas replied, and Hannah could see that he meant it. I enjoyed learning more about your work. It's given me a lot to think about. Hannah felt a pang of disappointment that their encounter was ending. In the space of an hour, this stranger had made her feel more understood and appreciated than she had in months. I've really enjoyed talking with you two, she said. It's not often I meet someone who listens the way you do. Lucas smiled, and Hannah noticed how different he looked when he wasn't carrying the weight of whatever responsibilities typically occupied his thoughts. Maybe our paths will cross again, he said. Seattle's not that big a city. I'd like that, Hannah said honestly, then felt a flush of embarrassment at her directness. I mean, if you ever need catering services, or if you know anyone who does, I'll definitely keep that in mind, Lucas said, and something in his tone suggested he was thinking about more than just potential business. Referrals. Hannah climbed into her van, rolling down the window to continue their conversation for a few more precious moments. I hope you don't get in trouble for being away from your duties so long, she said. Lucas laughed, a sound that was becoming increasingly familiar and comforting to Hannah. I think I can handle any consequences, he said. This was worth it. As Hannah started her van and prepared to leave, she felt an unexpected reluctance to end this magical interlude. Drive safely, Lucas said, stepping back from the van. And Hannah, don't let anyone convince you that your dreams are too small or too big. They're exactly the right size for you. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes at his words, touched by the genuine encouragement from someone who barely knew her, but somehow understood her struggles. Thank you, she said softly. That means more than you know. As she drove away from the Devereux Tower, Hannah kept glancing in her rearview mirror, watching Lucas's figure grow smaller in the distance. He stood there until she turned the corner, and she found herself wondering about this mysterious man who had made such an impact on her evening. There had been something almost familiar about him, as if she had seen him before, but she couldn't place where or when. The drive home gave Hannah time to process the evening's events. The gala had been a professional success, but her conversation with Lucas had been something else entirely, a reminder that meaningful connections could happen in the most unexpected circumstances. She found herself replaying their conversation, marveling at how easily they had moved from small talk to deep philosophical discussions about purpose and authenticity. Back in her studio apartment, Hannah showered off the rain and changed into comfortable clothes, but her mind remained focused on Lucas. There had been moments during their conversation when she sensed he was holding something back, some important detail about his life or work that he hadn't shared. But rather than feeling frustrated by the mystery, Hannah found herself respecting his privacy. Everyone deserved to have parts of themselves that remained hidden, especially someone who seemed to carry as much responsibility as Lucas did. She made herself a cup of tea and sat at her small kitchen table, looking out at the city lights through her rain-streaked window. The evening had reminded her of something she had been in danger of forgetting in the daily grind of building her business, that human connection was just as important as professional success. Lucas had seen her, really seen her, in a way that felt both rare and precious. Hannah's phone buzzed with a text from her assistant asking about the next day's schedule. As she responded, Hannah found herself thinking about Lucas's question regarding her dreams. What would she want if she could choose without considering anyone else's expectations? The answer that had emerged during their conversation felt more real and achievable than it had in months. Meanwhile, 30 floors above the city, Lucas Devereux stood in his executive office, still wearing his rain-soaked suit and staring out at the lights of Seattle. The gala had ended hours ago, but he had retreated to his office rather than facing the inevitable post-event debriefing with his staff. For the first time in months, perhaps years, he felt genuinely energized rather than drained after a social event. His assistant had left several messages asking about his whereabouts during the evening, but Lucas ignored them all. How could he explain that he had spent the most meaningful hour of his year talking to a caterer in the rain? That for 60 precious minutes, he had been able to forget about stock prices and board meetings and quarterly projections, and simply be a person having a conversation with another person? Lucas thought about Hannah's observation that creativity needed space to breathe. His life had become so structured, so focused on measurable outcomes, that he had forgotten what it felt like to let his mind wander, to engage with ideas for their own sake rather than their potential profit margin. Tonight had reminded him of who he used to be before success had defined every aspect of his identity. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through the evening's photos from the gala, looking for any image that might include Hannah. He found several shots of the buffet table, her artistic food arrangements clearly visible, but Hannah herself remained invisible, working behind the scenes as she preferred. Lucas found himself wishing he had a picture of her, some tangible reminder of their encounter. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. He was Lucas Devereux, a name that appeared regularly in business magazines and society pages, yet he had just spent an hour desperately wanting to be seen as simply Lucas, a person with thoughts and feelings beyond his professional achievements. Hannah had given him that gift without even knowing it, treating him with the same genuine interest she would have shown to anyone. Lucas walked to his desk and opened his laptop, pulling up the catering company's information from the event files. Reyes Catering, Hannah Reyes, proprietor. The simple business card design reflected the same understated elegance he had noticed in her food presentation. He found himself wondering about her dreams for a small restaurant, imagining the kind of warm, welcoming space she would create. Over the next few days, Lucas found himself thinking about Hannah more often than he had any right to, given their brief encounter. He caught himself looking for excuses to drive past her neighborhood, hoping for a glimpse of her catering van. He researched small restaurant loans and startup costs, telling himself it was general business curiosity rather than specific interest in Hannah's dreams. Hannah, meanwhile, threw herself into her work with renewed energy. The gala had generated several inquiries for future events, and she found herself more confident in client meetings, channeling some of the ease she had felt while talking with Lucas. She began sketching ideas for menu items that would work well in a small restaurant setting, allowing herself to dream more concretely about her future goals. A week after the gala, Hannah received an unexpected phone call. The caller identified himself as an assistant to Lucas Devereux, CEO of Devereux Industries, requesting her services for a private dinner party. Hannah was surprised by the high-profile referral, wondering which of the gala guests had recommended her services to such an important client. "Mr. Devereux specifically requested your catering company," the assistant explained. "He was very impressed with your work at the charity gala. The dinner party will be small, only 12 guests, but he wants something special, something that reflects creativity and attention to detail." Hannah accepted the job eagerly, honored to be chosen for such an important event. As she planned the menu, she found herself thinking about her conversation with Lucas, the limousine driver, wondering what he would think of her latest opportunity. She wished she had some way to contact him, to share her excitement about this career breakthrough. The private dinner party was scheduled for the following Friday at Lucas's penthouse apartment. Hannah spent the week perfecting her menu selections, choosing dishes that showcased both technical skill and emotional resonance. She decided to include a dessert inspired by her grandmother's empanadas, reimagined as delicate pastries filled with dulce de leche and garnished with edible flowers. Tiny treasures that would hopefully evoke the same wonder she had described to Lucas. On the evening of the dinner party, Hannah arrived at the exclusive residential building an hour early to set up. The penthouse was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city and elegant furnishings that spoke of both wealth and refined taste. Hannah was surprised to find that the kitchen was clearly designed for serious cooking, with professional-grade appliances and an impressive collection of high-quality cookware. As she prepared the final touches for the meal, Hannah heard the sound of guests arriving. She could distinguish several voices through the kitchen's service door, including one that seemed familiar, though she couldn't place it. The dinner party sounded intimate and relaxed, more like friends gathering than a formal business event. Hannah was plating the appetizer course when Lucas's assistant approached her in the kitchen. "Mr. Devereux would like to speak with you briefly before service," he said. "He's very particular about presentation and wants to review the evening's menu." Hannah followed the assistant through the apartment toward what she assumed would be a home office or study. Instead, he led her to the main living area where the guests were gathered for cocktails. "Mr. Devereux," the assistant said, "this is Hannah Reyes from Reyes Catering." Hannah looked up, prepared to meet her important client for the first time, and felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. Standing before her, wearing an elegant navy suit and holding a glass of wine, was Lucas, the limousine driver from the charity Gala. But the expression on his face, the way the other guests deferred to him, the obvious wealth surrounding them, suddenly made everything clear. "Hannah," Lucas said softly, his eyes holding a mixture of pleasure and apprehension. "I'm so glad you could cater tonight's dinner." Hannah felt heat rise in her cheeks as the full scope of her mistake became apparent. Lucas wasn't a limousine driver at all. He was Lucas Devereux, the CEO she had heard mentioned throughout the charity gala, the millionaire who had hired her services and was now standing before her as if their previous meeting had been perfectly normal. I didn't realize," Hannah stammered, feeling foolish and somehow betrayed. "You're Lucas Devereux, the Lucas Devereux." "I am," Lucas confirmed, stepping closer and lowering his voice so the other guests couldn't hear. "But I'm also just Lucas, the person you talked with in the rain." That conversation meant everything to me, Hannah. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Hannah felt a whirlwind of emotions, embarrassment, confusion, anger, and underneath it all, a hurt that surprised her with its intensity. "You let me think you were a driver," she said quietly. "You let me tell you about my struggles with money, my dreams of opening a restaurant, all while you were him." "I know how it looks," Lucas said urgently. "But please, understand, I wasn't trying to deceive you. When you assumed I was the driver, I didn't correct you because for the first time in years, someone was talking to me like I was a person instead of a corporation." Hannah shook her head, still processing the revelation. "All those things you said about pressure and expectations, about wanting to help people, was any of that real?" "Every word," Lucas said with quiet intensity. "Hannah, please believe me. That conversation was the most authentic interaction I've had in years. You saw something in me that I had almost forgotten existed." One of the dinner guests approached them, interrupting their intense exchange. "Lucas, aren't you going to introduce us to your chef?" the woman asked with the kind of smile that suggested she was accustomed to being the center of attention. "Of course," Lucas said, though his eyes remained fixed on Hannah. "Everyone, this is Hannah Reyes, the extraordinarily talented chef who created tonight's menu. Hannah, these are some of my closest friends." Hannah forced herself to focus on the introductions, accepting compliments about her previous work and answering questions about her culinary background. But part of her mind remained stuck on the revelation about Lucas's identity, trying to reconcile the thoughtful man she had talked with in the rain with the powerful CEO she was now supposed to serve. Throughout the dinner service, Hannah found herself stealing glances at Lucas, observing how he interacted with his guests. She noticed that he listened with the same attention he had shown her, that he asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in others' responses. But there was also a performance quality to his behavior, a careful management of his image that hadn't been present during their conversation in the rain. The dinner was a success by any measure. The guests raved about every course, particularly the reimagined empanada desserts, which sparked a lengthy discussion about the connection between food and memory. Hannah should have felt proud and accomplished, but instead, she felt unsettled, as if the evening was somehow built on a foundation of deception. As the guests prepared to leave, Several of them made a point of complimenting Hannah and requesting her contact information for future events. The evening would undoubtedly generate significant business opportunities, exactly the kind of breakthrough she had been working toward for years. But the professional triumph felt hollow in light of her confusion about Lucas. After the last guest departed, Hannah began cleaning up the kitchen, working with mechanical efficiency while her thoughts churned. She was nearly finished when Lucas appeared in the doorway, having changed from his dinner suit into jeans and a simple sweater that made him look more like the person she had talked with during the storm. "Hannah," he said quietly, "please don't leave without talking to me. I know you're upset, and I understand why, but I need you to know that nothing I said to you that night was false." Hannah continued loading equipment into her carrying cases, not trusting herself to look at him directly. "How am I supposed to know what's true?" she asked. "You let me talk about my financial struggles, my dreams, my family sacrifices, all while you were sitting on a fortune that could solve every problem I mentioned." "Because those struggles are real," Lucas said, stepping into the kitchen. "Your dreams are valid, regardless of my financial situation. I didn't want to diminish what you were feeling by revealing who I was." Hannah finally looked up at him, seeing the same earnest expression that had drawn her in during their first meeting. "But don't you see how patronizing that is? You made a decision about what I could and couldn't handle, without giving me the choice." Lucas was quiet for a moment, and Hannah could see him processing her words. "You're right," he said finally. "I was protecting myself, more than I was considering your feelings. I was selfish because I wanted to keep experiencing what it felt like to be seen as just a person." The admission took some of the edge off Hannah's anger, but the hurt remained. "I did see you as a person," she said softly. "I told you things I don't usually share with anyone. I thought we had connected on some real level." "We did," Lucas said with quiet urgency. "Hannah, that connection was real. It was the most genuine conversation I've had in years. Your insights about creativity and authenticity, about the courage it takes to follow your dreams, those weren't just words to me. They changed how I see my own life." Hannah wanted to believe him, but the deception still stung. "How do I know you're not just saying what you think I want to hear? How do I know when you're being Lucas, the person, versus Lucas, the CEO?" Lucas considered her question seriously, then walked to the kitchen island and sat down across from her. "Ask me anything," he said. "Anything at all. I'll answer with complete honesty, and you can decide for yourself whether I'm being real with you." Hannah studied his face, noting the vulnerability in his expression. Despite her anger and confusion, she found herself curious about this man who contained such contradictions. "Why did you disappear from your own charity gala?" she asked. "Because I was overwhelmed by the performance of it all," Lucas admitted. "I had given the same speech I give every year, shaken the same hands, had the same conversations about market trends and investment opportunities. I felt like I was suffocating in my own life." "So, you went to sit in a limousine?" Lucas smiled ruefully. "I went to my car to think. I often drive when I need to clear my head. It's one of the few times I feel completely alone with my thoughts." Hannah found herself softening slightly at the image of this powerful man seeking solitude in something as simple as driving. "What were you thinking about?" "Whether any of it mattered," Lucas said quietly. "All the money, the success, the recognition. I was wondering what I was actually contributing to the world beyond making rich people richer." The honesty in his voice resonated with Hannah, reminding her of the connection she had felt during their first conversation. "Is that why you wanted to help people?" "I've always wanted to help people," Lucas said, "but somewhere along the way, I got caught up in the machinery of success. It became easier to write checks than to get personally involved, to delegate compassion rather than practice it myself." Hannah set down the equipment she had been packing and really looked at Lucas, trying to see past her hurt feelings to the person underneath. "What changed?" she asked. "You did," Lucas said simply. "Talking with you reminded me of who I used to be, before everything became about the bottom line. You made me remember what it felt like to care about something bigger than myself." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with significance that Hannah wasn't sure she was ready to accept. "I'm just a caterer trying to build a small business," she said. "I don't have answers to life's big questions." But you do, Lucas insisted. You talked about creativity needing space to breathe, about the importance of authenticity, about having the courage to follow your dreams despite the risks. Those aren't small insights, Hannah. They're truths I had forgotten I needed to hear. Hannah felt her defenses beginning to crack, but she wasn't ready to let go of her hurt entirely. Why didn't you tell me who you were when you hired me for tonight? Lucas looked down at his hands, and Hannah could see the genuine remorse in his expression. I wanted to see you again, but I was afraid that if you knew who I was, you'd treat me differently. I was selfish. I wanted to preserve what we had shared, even if it meant being dishonest about my identity. But you had to know I'd find out eventually, Hannah pointed out. I hoped that by the time you did, you'd know me well enough to see past the titles and the money, Lucas admitted. I thought maybe we could build something real before the complications of my position got in the way. Hannah considered his words, recognizing the fear behind them. She had seen how people treated wealth and power, the way genuine relationships became almost impossible when money entered the equation. But she also couldn't ignore the fundamental deception that had colored their entire interaction. I need to understand something, Hannah said carefully. When you helped me load my van in the rain, when you listened to me talk about my dreams, when you encouraged me to take risks, was that Lucas the person, or Lucas the purse is the CEO, playing a role? Ah, it was me, Lucas said without hesitation. The most authentic version of myself that I've been able to access in years. Hannah, you made me remember what it felt like to care about someone else's dreams, more than my own profit margins. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes at the sincerity in his voice. Despite her anger about the deception, she couldn't deny that she had felt something real during their first conversation, a connection that had sustained her throughout the week that followed. I don't know how to process this, Hannah said honestly. Part of me wants to believe you, but another part feels like our entire interaction was built on a lie. What if we started over? Lucas suggested, not pretending the first conversation didn't happen, but acknowledging that we both know the truth now. What if we tried to build something real from this point forward? Hannah looked around the luxurious kitchen, so different from her own modest workspace, and wondered if genuine connection was possible across such a vast economic divide. I don't know if we can start over, she said. Too much has changed. Nothing important has changed, Lucas said urgently. I'm still the person who believes your dreams matter. I'm still someone who was inspired by your courage and authenticity. The only difference is that now you know I have the resources to help make those dreams reality, if you'll let me. The offer hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities and complications that Hannah wasn't sure she was ready to navigate. I don't want charity, she said firmly. I don't want to be someone's project, or tax write-off. That's not what I'm offering, Lucas said. I'm talking about partnership, about finding ways to support each other's goals. You have vision and talent and integrity. I have resources and connections. We could accomplish things together that neither of us could achieve alone. Hannah wanted to dismiss his offer as naive idealism, but something in his tone suggested he had thought seriously about the practical implications. What kind of partnership? She asked cautiously. I don't know yet, Lucas admitted. That's something we'd need to figure out together. But I do know that our conversation changed how I think about my own purpose. You maybe want to find ways to use my position to create meaningful change, rather than just accumulating more wealth. Hannah studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation, but she saw only earnest hope. Why me? She asked. You could partner with anyone, work with organizations that have established track records and proven impact. Because you see possibility where others see obstacles, Lucas said. Because you understand that success without authenticity is hollow. Because when you talked about your dreams, you weren't thinking about personal glory, you were thinking about creating something that would bring joy to other people. The words resonated with Hannah more than she wanted to admit. Throughout her struggle to build her catering business, she had often felt isolated in her values. Surrounded by people who measured success purely in financial terms, finding someone who seemed to understand her deeper motivations felt like discovering water in a desert. I need time to think, Hannah said finally. This is all happening too fast, and I can't make decisions about my future when I'm still processing what happened tonight." "Of course," Lucas said, though Hannah could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. But Hannah, please don't let my deception about my identity invalidate what you felt during our first conversation. That connection was real, even if the context wasn't what you thought." Hannah finished packing her equipment in silence, her mind spinning with possibilities and concerns in equal measure. Lucas watched her work, occasionally offering to help but mostly just being present in the comfortable way she remembered from their night in the rain. As she prepared to leave, Hannah turned back to face Lucas one more time. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I like the person I met in the rain better than the CEO I met tonight." "So do I," Lucas replied without hesitation. "That's why I want to find a way to be that person more often. You helped me remember who I could be." Hannah left the penthouse with more questions than answers, but also with a glimmer of hope that she tried to suppress. The drive home gave her time to process the evening's revelations, but also to acknowledge that her feelings for Lucas, complicated as they now were, hadn't disappeared with the discovery of his true identity. Over the following days, Hannah threw herself into work, trying to distract herself from thoughts of Lucas and the impossible situation they found themselves in. But she couldn't shake the memory of their conversation in the rain, or the way he had looked at her when he talked about wanting to create meaningful change. Despite her hurt over his deception, she found herself believing that his desire for authentic connection had been genuine. A week later, Hannah received a package with no return address. Inside, she found a business plan for a small restaurant, complete with financial projections, location suggestions, and market analysis. The cover letter was by, handwritten in Lucas's careful script, "Hannah." It read, "I know you need time to decide whether you can trust me, and I respect that. But I wanted you to know that your dreams matter to me, regardless of what happens between us personally. This business plan is a gift with no strings attached. Whether or not you choose to work with me, I believe in your vision for a restaurant that serves comfort food made with love. The world needs more places that feel like home." Lucas. Hannah sat at her kitchen table, staring at the comprehensive business plan that represented weeks of professional work. The financial projections were conservative but optimistic, the market analysis was thorough, and the suggested locations were all in neighborhoods that aligned with her vision for a community-focused restaurant. It was clear that Lucas had listened to everything she had told him about her dreams and had taken her goals seriously. The gesture was both touching and overwhelming. Hannah had never had anyone invest so much time and effort in understanding her aspirations, let alone someone with the resources to make them reality. But she also felt the weight of obligation that came with such a significant gift, even if Lucas claimed there were no strings attached. That evening, Hannah called Boole, her grandmother's number, needing to hear a familiar voice and perhaps gain some perspective on her complicated situation. Her grandmother listened patiently as Hannah explained the events of the past 2 weeks, offering occasional words of encouragement but mostly just being present in the way that had always made Hannah feel understood. "Mija," her grandmother said when Hannah finished her story, "it sounds like this man has touched your heart, but your head is telling you to be careful. Both of those feelings are valid." "I don't know how to separate his feelings from his money," Hannah admitted. "Everything is so complicated by the power imbalance between us." "Maybe the question isn't whether you can separate those things, but whether you can find a way to honor both your heart and your wisdom," her grandmother replied. "What does your intuition tell you about his character, aside from the deception?" Hannah considered the question carefully. "I think he's lonely," she said slowly. "I think he's been successful at everything except connecting with people in a meaningful way. When we talked in the rain, there was something desperate about the way he listened, like he was starving for genuine conversation." "And how did you feel during that conversation?" "Seen, Hannah said without hesitation. "For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like someone was truly interested in who I am rather than what I could do for them." "That's not nothing, Mija," her grandmother said gently. "Connection like that is rare, regardless of the circumstances that create it." After ending the call, Hannah sat with her grandmother's words, trying to untangle her feelings about Lucas from her concerns about his wealth and status. She realized that part of her anger came from fear, not just of her being deceived, but of allowing herself to hope for something that seemed too good to be true. The next morning, Hannah made a decision. She called the number Lucas had given her and asked if they could meet somewhere neutral, somewhere that didn't belong to either of their worlds. Lucas suggested a small coffee shop in a neighborhood that was equidistant between their respective homes, a place that was neither luxurious nor utilitarian, just comfortably ordinary. Hannah arrived first and chose a table by the window, watching the street traffic while she waited. When Lucas walked through the door, she was struck by how different he looked in jeans and a simple sweater, more like the person she had met in the rain than the CEO from the dinner party. He ordered a regular coffee rather than something elaborate, and Hannah found herself appreciating the small gesture toward normalcy. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Lucas said as he sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would want to see me again after the way things ended last week." "I wasn't sure either," Hannah admitted, "but I realized I had more to say, and some questions that need answers." Lucas nodded, settling back in his chair with the patient attention she remembered from their first conversation. "Ask me anything." Hannah took a deep breath, gathering her courage for the questions that had been haunting her. "Do you do this often? Connect with people while hiding your identity?" "Never," Lucas said immediately. "Hannah, what happened between us was completely unprecedented for me. I don't make a habit of deceiving people about who I am, but I also don't usually find myself in situations where I can just be a person rather than a position." "What made that night different?" Hannah asked. Lucas was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee while he considered his answer. "You treated me like I mattered beyond what I could provide," he said finally. "Most conversations I have, especially with people I don't know well, are transactional in some way. People want something from me, or they're positioning themselves for future opportunities. But you were just interested in talking, in sharing ideas and experiences." It was addictive. Hannah recognized the loneliness in his description, remembering her own feelings of isolation in the competitive world of small business ownership. "Is that why you hired me for the dinner party? To recreate that feeling?" "Partly," Lucas admitted, "but also because I wanted to see you again, and I was afraid that if I approached you as Lucas Devereux, you'd think I was just another wealthy client, rather than someone who genuinely cared about you as a person." "But I am just another client," Hannah pointed out. "That's the reality of our professional relationship." "It doesn't have to be," Lucas said quietly. "Hannah, I know the circumstances of how we met were unusual, and I know I handled the revelation poorly. But I also know that what I felt during our conversation was real, and I believe you felt it too." Hannah couldn't deny the truth of his words. Despite her hurt and confusion, she couldn't forget the warmth of connection she had experienced while talking with him in the rain. "I did feel it," she said softly, "but I don't know how to trust those feelings now." "What would it take for you to trust me again?" Lucas asked. Hannah considered the question, trying to identify what she needed to move forward. "Transparency," she said finally. "No more secrets, no more letting me make assumptions while you know better. If we're going to have any kind of relationship, personal or professional, it has to be built on honesty." "Done," Lucas said without hesitation. "What else?" "Equality," Hannah continued. "I know there's an inherent power imbalance because of your wealth, but I need to feel like we're partners rather than patron and beneficiary. I need to contribute something meaningful rather than just being the recipient of your generosity." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "I think that's not only possible, but essential. I don't want to be your patron, any more than you want to be my charity case. I want us to build something together where we're both investing and both benefiting." Hannah felt a spark of the same excitement she had experienced during their first conversation, the sense that she was talking to someone who truly understood her values and aspirations. "What would that look like practically?" she asked. "I don't know yet," Lucas admitted. "But I have some ideas, and I'd like to hear yours. What if we started small, with a single project that we could develop together? Something where your vision and expertise would be just as important as any financial resources I might contribute?" Hannah leaned forward, intrigued despite her caution. "What kind of project?" Lucas smiled, and Hannah saw a glimpse of the enthusiasm that had drawn her to him initially. "What if we created a pop-up restaurant? Something temporary that would let you test your concepts, and build a following without the massive financial commitment of a permanent location. You could maintain your catering business while exploring the restaurant side of your dreams. The idea was both exciting and terrifying to Hannah. A pop-up restaurant would be a significant step toward her long-term goals, but it would also require a level of risk and exposure that made her nervous. Where would be we do it? How would it work? There are several options, Lucas said, pulling out his phone to show her some research he had apparently done. Devereux Industries owns a building downtown that has retail space on the ground floor. It's been vacant for 6 months, while we decide what to do with it. We could convert it into a temporary restaurant space, something that would give you complete creative control while providing a testing ground for your concepts. Hannah studied the photos on his phone, seeing the potential in the empty space. The location was good, the foot traffic would be substantial, and the layout could work well for the kind of intimate dining experience she envisioned. But she also felt overwhelmed by the scope of what he was suggesting. "This is a huge opportunity," she said slowly. "But it's also a huge risk. What if I fail? What if the concept doesn't work? You'd be out a significant investment. What if you succeed beyond your wildest dreams?" Lucas countered, "Hannah, every worthwhile endeavor involves risk. The question isn't whether there's a possibility of failure, but whether the potential for success makes the risk worthwhile." Hannah found herself smiling at his words, remembering similar conversations they had had about the nature of entrepreneurship and the courage required to pursue meaningful goals. "You're using my own arguments against me," she said. "Only because they were good arguments," Lucas replied. "You convinced me that night that following your authentic vision is worth more than playing it safe. I'm just trying to remind you of your own wisdom." Hannah sat back in her chair, feeling the familiar tension between excitement and fear that accompanied every major decision in her entrepreneurial journey. The pop-up restaurant idea was exactly the kind of stepping stone she had been hoping for. A way to test her concepts without committing to the enormous financial risk of a permanent location. "What would you get out of this arrangement?" Hannah asked, needing to understand his motivations clearly. "The satisfaction of helping create something meaningful," Lucas said. "The opportunity to be involved in a project that's about more than profit margins. And the chance to work with someone whose values and vision inspire me to be better than I am." Hannah felt a flutter of warmth at his words, but she also recognized the importance of establishing clear boundaries. "If we do this, I need to be a true partner, not just the person who executes your vision. I need to have equal say in all major decisions." "Absolutely," Lucas agreed. "This would be your restaurant, your menu, your concept. I'd be providing resources and support, but the creative vision would be entirely yours." Hannah took a deep breath, feeling herself standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to jump but terrified of the fall. "I need some time to think about this," she said. "It's a big decision, and I want to make sure I'm choosing for the right reasons." "Of course," Lucas said. "Take all the time you need. But Hannah, I want you to know that whatever you decide about the restaurant, I'd still like to find a way to maintain our friendship. What we shared that night in the rain was important to me, and I don't want to lose that connection." Hannah felt her heart skip at the word friendship, recognizing that her feelings for Lucas had moved beyond mere professional interest. "I'd like that too," she said softly. "Despite everything that's happened, I can't forget how it felt to talk with you. I've missed that." Lucas's smile was warm and genuine, free from the calculated charm she had noticed at the dinner party. "I've missed it too. More than I expected to." As they parted ways outside the coffee shop, Hannah felt a sense of possibility that had been absent from her life for months. The pop-up restaurant idea was exciting, but even more important was the prospect of maintaining a connection with someone who seemed to understand her on a fundamental level. Over the next few days, Hannah found herself sketching menu ideas and restaurant layouts, allowing herself to dream more concretely about what her ideal dining establishment would look like. She researched pop-up restaurant models, reading success stories and cautionary tales with equal attention. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that Lucas's proposal could work. But Hannah also spent time examining her own motivations, trying to separate her excitement about the business opportunity from her growing feelings for Lucas. She realized that part of her hesitation came from fear of mixing personal and professional relationships, especially with someone whose resources could so dramatically impact her career. After a week of consideration, Hannah made her decision. She called Lucas and asked if they could meet again, this time at the vacant retail space he had mentioned. She wanted to see the potential restaurant location before committing to anything, to understand the practical realities of what they were considering. The empty storefront was everything Lucas had described and more. The space was larger than Hannah had expected, with excellent natural light and a layout that would work well for both kitchen operations and dining areas. Standing in the empty room, Hannah could envision exactly how she would transform it into the warm, welcoming restaurant of her dreams. "What do you think?" Lucas asked, watching her explore the space with obvious excitement. "It's perfect," Hannah said, running her hand along the exposed brick wall that would provide the rustic warmth she had always envisioned. "I can see exactly how it would work. The kitchen could go here, with an open design so diners could watch the cooking process. The dining area would be intimate but not cramped, maybe 25 seats maximum." Lucas listened intently as Hannah described her vision, occasionally asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested in understanding her concept rather than imposing his own ideas. As they walked through the space together, Hannah felt the same ease of conversation that had characterized their first meeting, the sense that they were collaborating rather than negotiating. "I have one condition," Hannah said, as they finished exploring the space. "If we do this, I want to pay rent for the space. I know you own the building, but I need this to feel like a real business relationship, not charity." Lucas considered her request seriously. "What if we structured it as a partnership? You contribute your expertise, time, and creative vision. I contribute the space and startup capital. We split any profits based on our respective investments." Hannah felt a surge of relief at his willingness to create a genuinely equitable arrangement. "That could work," she said, "but I want everything in writing, with clear expectations and boundaries. I've seen too many friendships destroyed by unclear business arrangements." "Absolutely," Lucas agreed. "I'll have my lawyers draw up a partnership agreement that protects both of our interests. We can review it together and make any changes you think are necessary." Over the next month, Hannah and Lucas worked together to develop their pop-up restaurant concept. They met regularly to discuss menu development, space design, and operational logistics. Hannah was impressed by Lucas's willingness to defer to her expertise while contributing valuable insights about business operations and customer service. The partnership felt balanced in a way that surprised Hannah, despite his wealth and business experience. Lucas never tried to take control of the project or override her decisions. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions that helped Hannah refine her ideas and offered resources that made her vision more achievable. As they worked together, Hannah began to see different aspects of Lucas's personality. She observed his genuine excitement about creating something meaningful, his careful attention to detail, and his respect for her expertise. The arrogant CEO she had feared was nowhere to be found, replaced by a collaborative partner who seemed as invested in the project's success as she was. "I've been thinking about the restaurant's mission statement," Hannah said during one of their planning meetings. "I want it to be more than just a place to eat. I want it to be a space where people feel welcomed and valued, where every meal feels like an act of hospitality." Lucas smiled, recognizing the echo of their first conversation about the connection between food and emotion. "That's exactly what drew me to your catering work," he said. "There's something different about food that's prepared with genuine care. People can taste the difference." Hannah felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. Remembering how isolated she had often felt in her commitment to values that seemed secondary to profit in the restaurant industry, having a partner who not only understood but actively supported her vision felt like a gift she had never expected to receive. The pop-up restaurant, which they decided to call Abuela's Table, in honor of Hannah's grandmother, was scheduled to open for a 6-week run in early spring. Hannah spent weeks perfecting her menu, creating dishes that honored her family's culinary traditions while incorporating the technical skills she had developed in culinary school. Lucas proved to be an invaluable partner in the practical aspects of launching the restaurant. He helped navigate permitting processes, connected Hannah with reliable suppliers, and used his business network to generate buzz about the upcoming opening. But he did all of this behind the scenes, ensuring that Hannah remained the face and voice of the restaurant. As opening night approached, Hannah felt a mixture of excitement and terror, unlike anything she had experienced before. This was her chance to prove that her vision for a community-focused restaurant could succeed, but it was also a very public test of her abilities as a chef and entrepreneur. Nervous? Lucas asked on the afternoon before their opening, finding Hannah in the restaurant kitchen making final preparations. Terrified, Hannah admitted, checking her mise en place for the dozenth time. What if nobody comes? What if the food isn't good enough? What if I've made a huge mistake? Lucas moved to stand beside her, his presence immediately calming. Do you remember what you told me that night in the rain about taking risks? He asked. You said that following your authentic vision was worth more than playing it safe. You convinced me to believe in the power of genuine passion over guaranteed outcomes. Hannah looked up at him, seeing the same encouraging expression that had given her courage during their first conversation. You're using my own words against me again, she said with a small smile. Because they were true then, and they're true now, Lucas replied. Hannah, you've created something beautiful here. Tomorrow night, people are going to experience not just a meal, but a genuine expression of your values and vision. That's rare and precious, regardless of what happens with Keen. The business side. Hannah felt her anxiety begin to ease, replaced by a sense of purpose that had sustained her throughout her entrepreneurial journey. Thank you, she said softly. For believing in this. For believing in me. Thank you, Lucas replied, for reminding me what it feels like to be part of something that matters. Opening night exceeded Hannah's wildest expectations. The restaurant was fully booked, with a waiting list of people hoping for cancellations. The local food critic attended, along with several influential members of Seattle's dining scene. More importantly, the customers seemed genuinely delighted by both the food and the atmosphere Hannah had created. Hannah watched from the kitchen as diners lingered over their meals, engaging in animated conversations and clearly enjoying the communal atmosphere she had envisioned. Several guests asked to speak with her personally, complimenting not just the food, but the overall experience of dining at Abuela's table. Lucas worked a front of house with a natural grace that surprised Hannah. She watched him interact with customers, never mentioning his own role in the restaurant, but clearly taking pride in what they had created together. He seemed genuinely happy in a way that reminded Hannah of their conversation about finding meaning beyond financial success. The 6-week run of Abuela's Table was an unqualified success. Every night was sold out, with reservations booking weeks in advance. The local media coverage was universally positive, with several reviewers specifically praising the restaurant's authentic approach to hospitality and community building. More importantly for Hannah, the experience validated her belief that there was a market for restaurants that prioritized values over pure profit. Customers responded enthusiastically to the personal attention, the carefully sourced ingredients, and the stories behind each dish. Several regulars became genuine friends, exactly the kind of community connection Hannah had hoped to foster. As the pop-up's run drew to a close, Hannah found herself facing a decision she hadn't expected to confront so soon. The success of Abuela's Table had generated interest from investors and restaurant groups who wanted to help her expand the concept. She had also received offers to cater high-profile events and develop a cookbook based on her family's recipes. What do you want to do next? Lucas asked during their final week of service. They were sitting in the empty dining room after closing, sharing a bottle of wine and reflecting on what they had accomplished together. I don't know, Hannah admitted. 6 weeks ago, I thought success would mean having clear next steps. But now that we've proven the concept works, I'm overwhelmed by all the possibilities. Lucas nodded thoughtfully, swirling the wine in his glass. What feels right to you? Not what's most lucrative or impressive, but what aligns with your values and vision. Hannah appreciated that he asked about her values, rather than her financial goals, recognizing that he understood her priorities in a way that most business advisors wouldn't. I think I want to open a permanent location, she said slowly. But I want to do it right, in a way that preserves what made this experience special. That sounds perfect, Lucas said. Have you thought about where you'd want to locate a permanent restaurant? Hannah had been considering this question for weeks, weighing factors like rent costs, customer demographics, and community impact. I keep coming back to the neighborhood where I grew up, she said. It's not the trendiest area, and the demographics aren't ideal from a pure profit perspective. But it's a community that could really benefit from a gathering place. Somewhere that celebrates the kind of multicultural heritage that makes the neighborhood special. End quote. Lucas smiled, and Hannah could see that her answer had pleased him. That sounds like exactly the kind of project that would have real impact, he said. Would you want to continue our partnership for a permanent location? Hannah had been hoping he would ask, though she hadn't wanted to assume his interest extended beyond the pop-up experiment. I'd love that, she said, but only if you're genuinely excited about the vision. I don't want you to feel obligated because of what we've built here. Hannah, Lucas said seriously, working with you on this project has been one of the most fulfilling experiences of my career. You've shown me what it looks like to build something that creates genuine value for people rather than just extracting profit from them. I'd be honored to continue our partnership. Hannah felt a surge of joy at his words, recognizing that their collaboration had become about much more than business success. Over the past 2 months, she and Lucas had developed a working relationship based on mutual respect and shared values, exactly the kind of partnership she had dreamed of but never thought she would find. As they began planning for a permanent location, Hannah and Lucas refined their partnership structure to reflect their evolving relationship. Hannah would have majority ownership of the restaurant, reflecting her role as the creative vision and operational leader. Lucas would provide financial backing and business support, while maintaining a minority stake that ensured his long-term commitment to the project's success. The legal arrangements were complex, but both Hannah and Lucas insisted on transparency and fairness at every step. They worked with independent lawyers to ensure that their agreement protected both parties, while preserving the collaborative spirit that had made their partnership successful. Finding the right location for the permanent restaurant took several months of searching. Hannah and Lucas visited dozens of potential sites, evaluating each one against Hannah's criteria for community impact and operational feasibility. They finally found a former family restaurant in Hannah's old neighborhood that had been closed for 2 years, a space with good bones and deep roots in the community. The renovation process gave Hannah and Lucas new opportunities to collaborate as they worked together to transform the tired space into a warm, welcoming restaurant that honored both the building's history and Hannah's vision. For the future, Lucas proved to have an unexpectedly good eye for design, contributing ideas that enhanced Hannah's concepts while respecting her role as the primary decision-maker. Throughout the renovation, Hannah found herself increasingly aware of her feelings for Lucas beyond their professional partnership. She appreciated his integrity, his willingness to support her leadership, and his genuine commitment to their shared values. But she also worried about the complications that a romantic relationship might introduce to their business partnership. Lucas seemed to be experiencing similar internal conflicts. Hannah noticed moments when their professional conversations veered toward more personal territory, when their collaboration felt charged with emotional undercurrents that had nothing to do with restaurant operations. But both of them seemed cautious about acknowledging these feelings openly, perhaps recognizing the potential impact on their business relationship. The tension came to a head during the final week of renovation. Hannah and Lucas were working late, putting finishing touches on the dining room decor, when a miscommunication about the placement of artwork led to their first real disagreement. The argument wasn't about the artwork itself, but about deeper questions of control and decision-making authority that they had never fully resolved. "I feel like you're second-guessing my choices," Hannah said, frustration evident in her voice. "We agreed that I would have creative control, but then you override my decisions about things that matter to me." "I'm not trying to override you," Lucas replied, equally frustrated. "I'm trying to contribute ideas that might improve what we're creating. I thought we were partners, not employer and employee." "We are partners," Hannah said. "But this is my restaurant, my vision. Sometimes I feel like you forget that and start thinking like a CEO who's used to making all the decisions." The accusation stunned Lucas more than Hannah had intended, touching on insecurities about his tendency to default to executive behavior, even in collaborative relationships. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. Sometimes I do forget that this isn't my project to control." Hannah immediately regretted her harsh words, recognizing that Lucas had been nothing but supportive throughout their partnership. "I'm sorry too," she said. "I know you're not trying to control anything. I think I'm just nervous about the opening, and I'm taking it out on you." They stood in the empty dining room, both of them recognizing that their argument had been about more than artwork placement or decision-making authority. The tension they had been avoiding for months had finally surfaced, and they needed to address it honestly. "Lucas," Hannah said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Anything," Lucas replied, though Hannah could see apprehension in his expression. "Are your feelings about this partnership purely professional?" Hannah asked. "Because mine aren't, and I need to know if that's a problem." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, staring at the carefully arranged tables and chairs that represented months of shared work and planning. "No," he said finally. "My feelings aren't purely professional either. I've been trying to ignore that because I didn't want to complicate our business relationship, but it's becoming impossible." Hannah felt a mixture of relief and anxiety at his admission. "What do we do about it?" she asked. "I don't know," Lucas admitted. "I've never been in a situation where my personal and professional lives were so intertwined. Part of me wants to explore what's happening between us, but another part worries about what it might mean for the restaurant." Hannah nodded, recognizing the complexity of their situation. "Maybe we need to decide what's more important," she said. "The business partnership, or the possibility of something personal. Do we have to choose?" Lucas asked. "Is it possible to have both, if we're careful about maintaining boundaries?" Hannah considered his question, weighing her desire for romantic connection against her commitment to the restaurant that represented years of dreams and hard work. "I think it's possible," she said slowly, "but only if we're completely honest with each other about our expectations and concerns." "What are your concerns?" Lucas asked. "That if things don't work out between us personally, it could destroy what we've built professionally," Hannah said. "This restaurant means everything to me, and I can't risk losing it because of a relationship that doesn't work." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "That's a valid concern. My worry is different. I'm afraid that my wealth and status will always create an imbalance between us. Even in a personal relationship, I don't want you to ever feel like you can't be honest with me because of what I could do for your career." Hannah appreciated his awareness of the power dynamics that would inevitably affect their relationship. "What if we agree to separate our personal and professional interactions as much as possible?" she suggested. "When we're dealing with restaurant business, we focus entirely on that. When we're exploring our personal connection, we try to set aside the business considerations." "That sounds reasonable," Lucas said. "But what if one affects the other? What if personal conflicts spill over into business decisions, or business stress impacts our personal relationship?" "Then we deal with those situations as they arise," Hannah replied. "I don't think we can anticipate every potential problem, but we can commit to addressing them honestly when they occur." Lucas smiled, and Hannah saw the same warmth in his expression that had drawn her to him during their first conversation in the rain. "Are you saying you want to try this? Both the business partnership and the personal relationship?" "I'm saying I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if we were brave enough to try," Hannah said. "What we've built together professionally is already more than I dreamed possible. Maybe we can build something equally meaningful personally." Lucas stepped closer to Hannah, reaching out to take her hands in his. "I've been thinking about that night in the rain, every day for months," he said. "Not just because of the business opportunities it led to, but because of how it felt to connect with you so genuinely. I don't want to lose that." Hannah felt her heart skip at the touch of his hands and the sincerity in his voice. "You're not going to lose it," she said softly. "We're just going to explore where it leads us." When Lucas kissed her, gentle and tentative at first, then with growing confidence as Hannah responded, it felt like the natural culmination of months of building trust and understanding. The empty restaurant around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the warmth of connection that had sustained them through the challenges of their partnership. The permanent location of Abuela's Table opened 6 months later to widespread acclaim. The restaurant was everything Hannah had envisioned, a warm and welcoming space that served as both a neighborhood gathering place and a destination for food lovers from across the city. The menu honored Hannah's family traditions while showcasing her technical skills and creative vision. More importantly for Hannah, the restaurant succeeded in creating the kind of community impact she had dreamed of. Regular customers became friends, staff members felt valued and supported, and the restaurant served as a hub for neighborhood events and celebrations. Local food writers praised not just the quality of the food, but the authentic sense of hospitality that permeated every aspect of the dining experience. Hannah's relationship with Lucas evolved alongside the restaurant's success, growing stronger as they learned to navigate the complexities of mixing personal and professional partnerships. They developed strategies for maintaining boundaries when necessary, while supporting each other's goals and dreams. Lucas found in Hannah not just a romantic partner, but a guide who helped him rediscover his own values and purpose. Through their work together, he began redirecting his business activities toward projects that created meaningful social impact, rather than just financial returns. Hannah's influence helped him remember that success could be measured in terms of human connection and community benefit, rather than purely monetary gain. Hannah, in turn, found in Lucas not just financial support, but genuine intellectual partnership. His business experience and strategic thinking complemented her creative vision and operational skills, allowing them to build something together that neither could have achieved alone. More importantly, Lucas's unwavering belief in her abilities gave Hannah the confidence to dream bigger than she had ever allowed herself before. One evening, nearly a year after Abuela's table's permanent opening, Hannah and Lucas sat in their restaurant after closing, sharing a quiet dinner and reflecting on how far they had traveled from that rainy night when they first met. The dining room around them hummed with the energy of a successful service, tables bearing the remnants of meals that had brought joy to dozens of families and friends. "Do you ever think about that night at the Devereux Tower?" Hannah asked, cutting into the flan that had become one of the restaurant's signature desserts. "How different things might have been if it hadn't rained." Lucas smiled, remembering the desperation he had felt that evening, the sense that his life had become a series of performances rather than authentic experiences. "I think about it often," he said. "I was so lost that night, so disconnected from anything that felt real or meaningful. If you hadn't ended up in that loading dock, if we hadn't started talking, I might never have found my way back to the person I wanted to be." "You are always that person," Hannah said gently. "You just needed someone to see you clearly enough to remind you. And you needed someone to believe in your dreams enough to help make them reality," Lucas replied. "We gave each other exactly what we needed, even before we understood what that was." Hannah looked around the restaurant that represented the fulfillment of dreams she had barely dared to articulate, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude for the unexpected turns that had brought her to this moment. "My grandmother always said that the best things in life come when you're not looking for them," she said. "I was just trying to get out of the rain that night. And I was just trying to escape from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else," Lucas added. "Neither of us was looking for love or partnership or any of this." "Maybe that's why it worked," Hannah suggested. "We were both being completely authentic because we had no agenda beyond having a genuine conversation." Lucas reached across the table to take Hannah's hand, marveling at how natural the gesture had become, despite the unlikely circumstances that had brought them together. "Whatever happens next," he said, "I want you to know that meeting you changed everything for me. You showed me what it means to live with integrity and purpose." "You changed everything for me too," Hannah replied, squeezing his hand. "You showed me that success doesn't require sacrificing your values, that it's possible to build something meaningful while staying true to who you are." As they sat together in the restaurant that had become the symbol of their shared dreams, Hannah and Lucas reflected on the journey that had brought them from that chance encounter in the rain to this moment of quiet contentment. They had built not just a successful business, but a life together based on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of authentic connection that had seemed impossible in their separate worlds. The story of the shy caterer who took shelter in a limousine and discovered that the driver was a millionaire CEO had become, in the end, something much more significant. It had become the story of two people who found in each other the missing pieces of themselves, who learned that true success meant creating something together that honored both their individual dreams and their shared commitment to making the world a little more welcoming, one meal at a time. Outside the restaurant windows, Seattle's evening rain began to fall again, but inside Abuela's table, Hannah and Lucas sat surrounded by the warmth they had created together, grateful for the storm that had brought them together and the courage they had found to build something beautiful from the most unexpected beginning.